on AI in action. This week, Sebastian volunteered last week, thank you, to do some research and then dive into the agent-to-agent protocol that I think it was Google just put out. So be very interested to see what the reality is behind this and how it's looking. So yeah, let me just hand over to you and take us away.
Sounds good. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please relay them to me, K-Ball. Okay, so let's begin with where the inspiration for like agent to agent protocol comes from. So basically over the course of the past couple of years since ChatGPT released their API, there's been a lot of conventions on how, we should use um we should interface with existing foundation models, and that began with like the chat completions API, and then eventually we had the addition of function calling, and eventually we ended up with eventually we ended up with MCP, which is like a formalization of function calling, and now we have agents, which the agent definition that they currently use is actually showcased here in their comparison with agent to agent and MCP. So let's just get this definition out of the way. So agents are autonomous applications that can accomplish novel tasks by using tools, and by tools they're implying MCP or something of the sort. Um, reasoning, and user interactions. So additionally, agent applications must use both tools and agents to accomplish goals for their tasks. And as I was like thinking about like what is the differentiating factor between A2A and MCP, I think that like a good proxy for a good analogy for like understanding what it is like you think of a professional, right? Whenever you like buy something from, um let's say whenever you buy a service from a freelancer, you're basically you're requesting you're the freelancer is doing several tasks in order to complete your request. You can think of the freelancer as a professional, and in case that you're like using like hiring like a consulting company, then you'd be like hiring like the company itself. So you have like three different levels of like complexity. You have like the tool itself, which is the tools that are used by the professional. Then you have the professional, and then you have like a company. And so you have the tool represents in this case would be like MCP. A2A represents the professional, and then company is to be decided. But um, like um, you could always like make the you can always make the suggestion that like a company is just an agent, is a professional that can access a lot of other professionals, and you can extrapolate this even with like MCP. Like this is how people are using MCP as well, as far as I understand. Which is like you can just have MCP be an agent as well. So there's like some conflicting. There's a bit of a dilemma on like um is MCP all we need? Because you could basically call the professional you could call the professional a tool as well. So basically the tool is a tool, the professional is a tool, and then the company is a tool. So like this distinction, I think the value that is actually being provided here is just a formalization of how to like better communicate things and how to convey like what what is the purpose and what is the internal complexity of like each step in like getting some task accomplished. So that is like a brief rundown of like how I see A2A in comparison to MCP, because I think like um assessing them by comparison is the most like effective way to really understand what the purpose is. Um so so let's get started into like what the protocol actually looks like, and I'm just gonna hop over to my CLI and go over some structures. And for that, we're just gonna go here, Google comments, types, something like agent card. Yeah, this thing. Okay, so whenever you're configuring an agent inside the agents to agents protocol, what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna establish these fields, and this is somewhat similar to MCP. And again, if it sounds like if I'm making any incorrect assumptions about MCP, that is because they are assumptions. I'm not that knowledgeable on MCP. I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable on like chat completions, somewhat knowledgeable on responses API, and pretty knowledgeable on function calling, but not very knowledgeable on MCP. So please feel free to call me out if I make any mistakes. But yeah, so what you're gonna do whenever you're creating an agent is you're gonna configure each one of these fields. Um, oh, and also how you get access to this is through their GitHub. I'm basically just looking at their repo, and I'll post it here. Okay, so let's go back here and just verify. Okay. Yeah, so you have a name. Okay, there's actually no. That's a shame. I'll actually end up using um their documentation instead. They actually have some interesting comments whenever they're describing each one of these fields. So let's see if they actually run through this anywhere in their docs. Agent skills, agent card. Okay, well, agent skills. Um, okay, skills is a separate thing. I will cover this in a moment, but I just wanted to see if they did the same for agent card, and they did not. Okay. I'm sure somewhere in here they do cover it, but I'll just run you through the basics of what it is. Okay. Going back to the pedantic schema here. So you have the name, you have the description, and you have the URL for where you can find this the URL of where you should be like pinging this agent. And something that they mention is that they're like adhering to a common convention whenever you're creating these descriptions of a product by um, basically doing URL slash dot well known slash well known slash something. Don't remember what it was called, but um, maybe here agent card. Oh, okay, sweet. Yeah, this is what I was looking for. Okay, so this is basically where you're going to reroute the. This is basically what you're gonna enter. No, this is where you're gonna communicate the model card. So whenever a user wants to use your agent, they're gonna go to your website and basically append this path to your website so that they can access the model card. And once they have access to the model card, they should be able to receive a um, a configured schema that contains all of this information. So um, so yeah, going back to things, going back to describing the agent card, you're gonna provide a URL, which is like the URL with which you're gonna communicate with the agent. Um, then the provider, I don't. This is not necessary as indicated by the question mark here. This is optional. The version, documentation URL, optional too. Capabilities. So one of the capabilities is streaming. This is already supported. There's also two other, another capability that is also interesting, which is push notifications, which this is just identifying the capabilities that are possible. I wasn't able to play around with push notifications, but I did look at at how you go about configuring that. Here, here. Okay, so you're basically establishing a list of a list. Is this a list? Well, I'm not entirely sure. But what's happening here is you're basically just giving it a callback route to um, say you want to communicate with an agent. We should probably diagram this. Um, if you want to communicate with an agent, you want the agent to be able to reach back to you in one like in the after you've started the task, you want it to be able to reach out to your original to your original like to your original server. And so you're gonna tell the agent like what your where you want the messages to be sent, which is done here, and what the authentication is in order to send messages back to your server whenever some action is completed on the agent side. So, for example, if an agent has a long-running process, think of like deep research, and you want it to like ping you back whenever it's complete, whenever it has completed its task. You can basically send it the original task, and then once it is complete with that task, it can then call back your URL, the URL that you've configured here for your push notification. Um, so yeah, and another interesting part is it can actually this protocol addresses authentication as well. I don't know how many schemes it allows, and we can actually look. We can look at the literal of what of the different schemes that it allows if we go here, because we do have like agent authentication, and it's basically ambiguous. So they haven't really established what the different schemes are. I'm guessing like if you do OAuth, you just follow like the common OAuth procedure. Um, but in that case, I feel like it's kind of devoid of some additional details. If you look at, for example, function calling, it was a bit more robust. Function calling authentication, or not function calling. I mean plugin or GPT's authentication. Um, Yeah, so this is gonna be a big tangent, but normally when you're configuring like authentication, you need a lot more fields in order to indicate like when you're passing the token and where you want the callback to be. And currently, just by simply indicating a scheme, a scheme, I don't think is sufficient. So this is probably an area that still needs some additional development. So going back to the agent, agent, agent card. So going back to the um, agent card. Okay, going back to the agent card, you have the capabilities of push notification, streaming, and state transition history. Haven't played around with this one, so I will not cover it at all. I don't really know what they're even suggesting here. Um, Authentication is the other big thing. Like if you need to authenticate in order to get access to an agent, this protocol already addresses that. I wasn't able to get working with authentication either. And then a- there's there's also indications of how you are supposed to like interact with the agent. Um, for example, if an agent accepts images, or if it accepts text, or images and text, or images and text and videos, for example, or maybe audio files, you would indicate this here, um, by indicating the default input modes and default output modes. Then you have the skills, which are more granular descriptions of what the agent does. So you'll see a lot of redundancy here. You'll see ID, name, description, tags, which is, well, just tags, and then examples, which is actually a really nice addition. I don't know if MCP also offers that. Um, and it also has input modes and output modes. I thought that um, skills actually had. Oh, no, no. Okay, so um, what's happening here is that these input modes and output modes will override the default input modes and output modes um of the original agent card. So that's what's happening in the skills side of things here. Okay, so that's just a rundown of the agent card. I thought it was very important to run through this, because otherwise, like this is a protocol. Like it's not going to be very exciting. If this doesn't interest you guys, then the rest of the presentation probably won't. But yeah, this is basically how they've configured things. Um, and now I'm just gonna run through like an actual example of it running live. So, um, so yeah, the three main components, and I think I should have covered this earlier. The three main components to MCP is one, the user, the human user. Two is the client, the interface that the user is interacting with, and then the server, which is it's supposed to indicate the actual agent that the client is interacting with. So what I'm going to be running first here is the server, and what this is. Oh, think I just threw this somewhere. It's causing syntax errors. So if I go, oh no, let's go here. Great. Okay, so I'm gonna be running the server. Um, yeah, so this is running, and I'll show you where it's running it. I'll show you the code for what it's actually running. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to interrupt. So okay, so you have yeah, agent was never used. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically just setting up a what server? I'm starting up a server here towards the end. Wait, am I looking at the right thing? Um, oh no, it's an init. Okay, here, this is basically using UVcorn behind the scenes to get a server running. So I'm basically configuring the server here with an agent card that is set up here. And all this does, there's no LLMs involved. This is very simple. All this agent is supposed to do is just echo whatever you send to it. So if I tell it hello, it's just gonna respond with hello. Um, so yeah, the name description URL. The URL is the URL from URL where the agent is hosted, which is the current host, basically this local host 1000 or 10,002. Um, version, default input modes, default output modes, capabilities, and skills. So, and what the skills are is basically just the ability to echo whatever input you give it. Um, and this has these tags, and the input and output modes are the same. So that is the configuration of the agent server. And then the server started here. And also another important thing is that is the task manager. This abstracts away like a lot of the state management, meaning the actual conversation history. So I'm not actually managing the conversation history anywhere in this code. It is basically managed through a task. And what a task is basically um like the highest level of the exchange between the client and the server. So and I think I'm gonna describe this as I actually run this. So yeah, so this is the server that's currently being ran. This is the server that's being ran, and then the client is configured. Well, actually, I'm using the actual repo client. Okay, so I'm starting up the client, and the client is basically just a CLI interface with which I can just enter a text and it'll send it over to the agent. And here you can see the agent card being printed with the capabilities, default input mode, skills, and the rest. So if I were to tell it here to echo something, echo just basically $3 um, you will see that it's actually streaming the events back. So let's actually get to how things are being streamed. Um, not sure this is large enough. I hope it is. Can you guys actually read the text on screen?
Yeah, some people don't seem to be able to see the screen, but I can read it just fine.
Oh,
I don't know.
but the screen at all,
Yeah, some
or
folks are
just the
struggling with
text?
Discord stream,
Okay,
but
I think I'll be needing this.
yeah,
Okay,
it's pretty clear on my end. I
great.
think Yaku's got it.
All right. Yeah, so moving forward, I was gonna cover like how the streaming actually works. Of course, streaming is like a bit more complicated um than just a regular HTTP like post request. Um, and yeah, another thing of note is that the agent to agents protocol is built on top of HTTP, HTTP, basically HTTP. And it's also using server side events for streaming as yeah. So Sorry, I just have way too many things open. I don't really know what half these things do. Uh, Types, agent. This one doesn't do anything. Okay, yeah. So this is the CLI. This is basically what's going to be sending the messages over to the server. And this is basically what you saw a moment ago, like when I first ran this, and we can just run it again. Um, when I first run this, it's basically running this, it's printing out the agent card, as you can see here, agent card, and then it's like receiving the agent card from the server, and also the server. How does it know like what server to hit? And that's because I've configured it via the original execution command via this agent tag. So that's how it knows what server to hit. If I were to do 3, it's not gonna like hit anything. Um, so if we do 2 again, it's gonna get the agent card from the dot well known slash agent dot JSON, and then it's gonna know like how the agent how to interact with the agent. So what do we want to send to the agent? Whenever we send a request, what's going to happen is it'll basically go through these initial steps. Continue loop. Um, okay, it's going to go through continue loop, and it's going to ask for, it's going to make a call to this complete task. This complete task is going to um, build out a message. So something that I do need to address is that um, something I need to address is that like message does not um is when agents to agents talk whenever you see agents to agents talking about message, it is just a singular message that could be comprised of several messages. So message is kind of like analogous to chat history in chat completions world, chat completions and responses API. So a message is comprised of multiple parts, and I think this makes a lot of sense to structure things this way because you're talking to an agent. Whenever you're talking to an agent, you basically send a request on what you want to build. You do not really care about how it is done. The agent has takes multiple steps in order to get it done, and that's where like parts comes in. Um, and then it basically replies to you with basically a single message that is comprised of these multiple parts, of these multiple different sequence of steps that it took in order to like fulfill your request. So yeah, you're basically whenever you're completing tasks, the client is basically assembling a message over to the agent that 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 has hmm okay, actually I'm looking at the wrong thing. So this is a file path. This is something you can add. Like if I do $3 and then here it also gives me the option to like attach a file because this protocol addresses like multimodality, so you can also pass in images and any other files. I don't know if any file would work, but I know that the CLI is definitely not sufficiently robust to like handle any file, but we're just not going to pass in any files, and so now we actually sent the message uh, without a file. So what ends up happening afterwards is no push notifications either. Um, streaming. Wait, where's the? Okay, yeah. Here's the original message. So basically, type text. It's gonna basically append this. Yeah, it's basically gonna create a part that is comprised of a type text and then a prompt response. Basically, by prompt response, I mean like if the prompt is the CLI asking for you to send a message, then the response is the message that you entered into the CLI. Sorry if this is a bit confusing. Um, so yeah, this is the message that I originally sent, the $3 signs. It basically composes this and then sends it over to the server. And then once it's in the server, what it will do is um, go to Task Manager on send task. Um, So here it's going to basically create the new task based on the user request. Here with the upsert task, and once the task is in, it should be running. Okay, it's eventually going to run. Sorry, this is not the actual like entire thing. Um, on some task subscriptions. So this is what's actually being run. The subscription. I'm since this is a stream, this the on-send task subscriptions is what is being like triggered whenever I send a message to the server. So what happens is it's upserting the new task, and also the task ID is configured by the client, which I thought was somewhat interesting. Um, but the server side manages like the conversation history, and then it is up to the client to determine what to do with the return history from the agent. So if you have several exchanges between the client and the server, it is the it well several different tasks. If the client has task one that the client wants to get completed by the server, then the server will complete that, and then if the client wants task two to get completed, it is up to the client. It is up to the server to determine whether or not it wants to like actually continue that conversation. And I think this is tracked by session ID. So session ID is one of the parameters that is like passed um, into the request. So let me just verify this. So yeah, you have session ID, and then you have like task ID. Um, yeah, yeah. So you have like the task ID, you have the session ID. Um, and as far as I interpret things, the session ID is the individual task. The session is like it can be a long-lived session between one client and multiple tasks to get fulfilled by the server. So that's how I interpret things. Um, okay, so going back to the server, is it task manager? Um, so yeah, it's observing the task based on the original user request, and then um, yeah, let's see. So there's a lot of logic here. I'm not gonna run through every single line, um, partially because I'm not entirely clear with like what every single line means. Um, but yeah, so what it's going to do right now is this agent is illustrating one of the features where that was like originally introduced in like function calling, which allows you to request from the original have the server request the client for additional inputs. So so what is happening here? Like here, it's asking, would you like more messages? And this is something that it's a prompt that, or it's a string that I specifically configured um, to illustrate the idea of the agent being able to make a request back to the client. And so the way this ends up happening is you basically just set the status of the current task to be input required. And something that is actually not made clear in their documentation is that it's not supposed to be final. Like whenever whenever a task reaches a state of input required, it does not mean that the task is finished. The task is finished when it is finished. And this is kind of an oversight in their documentation from their Python tutorial. Yeah, so just be be on your toes whenever you're going through the tutorial. This is not the only issue. I'll probably continue running through like these issues as I go through it, but um, where is it? Like, equals true. Yeah, final equals true. That's input required. Yeah. So here it's requiring input, but it's suggesting that the final is true. Maybe this is the way that A2A is designed. I don't know where the actual specification for this is. I was looking for it for a good bit. I don't know where it is. So maybe it is supposed to be designed for like the task to finish whenever input's required, which doesn't make any sense to me. But I highly doubt it. So for all intents and purposes, I'm gonna assume it's not supposed to be final, and this is just an oversight. Yeah. So going back to like the input required showcase of like what an agent can do. Um, I'm basically asking the user if they would like for me to like repeat the echo. Um, and so I can either say yes or no here. I'll say yes. Give me the input again. It's gonna ask again for the file path. This is because it is recursive. It's basically just calling the same complete. Uh, the CLI is coming is basically just sending another request to the agent. And I would like to show that. So yeah, it's basically running complete task again. So whenever we go to like streaming, and we get a result from the stream, we're gonna check whether it's input required, and then if it is input required, we're gonna recursively just call complete task again. So that is what's happening. That's why we're seeing like a very similar interface as the one we originally had whenever we first started up the CLI. So again, no file, and we're gonna see the same three messages. Um, and again, this is a stream. I'm streaming three messages back, which is like three echoes, three distinct echoes. Uh, oh, and because that last input is Y, it is deciding to like echo Y. Um, so this is a matter of like the client being kind of finicky. So yeah, I never actually went through the logs. So let's just run this again, and let's do the $3 signs as the initial input. Um, this is supposed to simulate a stream, and when we look at after I inputted my $3 signs, it's gonna start streaming. It's gonna make it. It's gonna create a task. It's gonna create a task for the agent. The agent is gonna stream back three messages. So the first one is the $3 signs one, and then the next one is like $3 signs two, and so on and so forth inside the inside the message field as a part. Okay, so and here's the third one. Um, Oh, and there's another one. Oh, yeah, and then there's another message that is conveying that the there is an input required from the client. This is what the message is going to look like. The state is input required, and the text is would you like more messages? And then that's what we're seeing here. So if we say no or yes, I want more messages, it's also going to interpret the Y as like it's well actually. It doesn't necessarily need to be a Y. It is not yes or no. It is anything or N. So if we do dollar dollar dollar, you'll see up here again dollar dollar dollar, and then just we'll do percent. We run that, and then we should see here percent 3. So that is again running the message again, but this is just this is specifically how I configured my agent to do this. How I configured the agent to respond to like the input after it requests for how. Sorry, I probably should be drawing things as I'm describing. If you guys have any questions, again, please ask. Um, but yeah, so the agent is asking me for additional input. I provide the additional input, and what it does with that additional input is it echoes it, and then it goes back to like asking me if I want more additional input, and so on and so forth. And we're just gonna break this cycle, and now it's finished, as you can tell by this starting a new task. Okay, so that is how the agent interaction works. Um, uh, yeah. Okay, so another thing I want to point out with their tutorial is another big oversight, um, which was somewhere like where is this? Is it not in task? Is new task? Is new task? In case you do get, in case you guys want to like run through this documentation yourselves, uh, this is another problem. I'm probably gonna do a PR for this later, but if you guys are really eager to um, start testing out A2A, this is this statement doesn't make sense. Um, so what it's suggesting here is if task ID is in tasks, then it is a new task. This is wrong. Um, if the task ID already exists in task, that implies that the task has already been created and therefore it is not a new task. So there should be like task ID not in. Um, so this is basically just the code for that. Task ID not this. So this is how it should work. This PR is already in, but not merged. Um, Yeah, but again, this is just the CLI for basically a toy CLI to be able to experiment with A2A. And now I'm gonna run a different agent with the same CLI that actually accepts picture. Well, yeah, it does accept pictures, although I haven't actually tested that, but we'll give it a shot. Um, so agents to where was the crew? Um, Let's see, test samples, Python, agents, crew AI, readme. How did I start this thing? CD samples. Okay. Oh, what? Example. Okay. And then we run. I already have my Google API key configured. Then we run. Oh, I need to deactivate this. And then activate source again. Then agent. Activate. Okay, we've activated the virtual environment for crew AI for the crew AI agent. Then we're gonna run this, or actually, maybe we will run the default, whatever the default is. Oh no! All right, I'm gonna need to stop streaming for a second.
Yeah, don't record your environmental key, please. No keys should make their way onto the screen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna stop streaming for a
Right.
second, unless somebody wants to donate their key. um.
Key. Also, make sure you clear it out of your more comprehensive than MCP in the sense that you could build anything that an MCP could do using A to A, but not the other way around.
Oh, I don't know. Um. I just know that there's like some distinct features that A2A, I mean, MCP does not currently support. I know that MCP has like an intent to support authentication. Authentication is a big one, I think, and it cannot be overlooked. Like if you want to actually like monetize things, I would probably go for A2A. Another thing is like these push notifications. I don't know if MCP has any um opinion over that. Um, and also I like that the way that I like the way that A2A handles messages. It seems to resemble like what OpenAI seems to be doing with responses API. And in fact, I think that A2A is more similar to like responses API than like MCP. And I think that that is like actually like a something worth thinking about. Like I've been making a lot of comparisons to MCP just because that's just how people seem to be interpreting things. But I, like after playing around with it, I think there should be like more comparisons between this and responses API. Like if you think of like check completions as the standard for like the old LLM text only way of doing things, then the new standard way of doing things may either be responses API or A2A. As for where MCP falls into that, I'm not entirely sure. I think MCP again, like is designed for tools. Okay, so I started the stream again, and I started the server as well. So now that it's running the server 101, okay, 10,001. So now I'm gonna basically showcase their example agent, which is actually like using basically text to image to produce images. So I'll show you what that's gonna look like. Um, so we'll start the server up. The URL is this. Again, accessing the well-known, getting the agent, getting the agent card. And here you can see like what it does. It is an image generator agent, generates stunning whatever images. Um, and then capabilities, it does not support streaming, push notification, it doesn't support any of that. Um, and in fact, I'm kind of like demonstrating how you would go about using A2A just casually. And this is basically all you would need to do. You would need to just like know where the URL of the slash well-known agent is, and then just look at the agent card, and then the rest of the interface between you and that agent should be standardized by A2A. So the same way the same way I interacted with my toy example of just echoing is the same way I'm going to interact with this image generator agent. So again, the skills that it has is image generator, generates images. And then here's an example. We're gonna copy this example and then paste it in here and then give it a couple seconds to generate the image. And then the file is saved to here. Also, originally it would like return the entire like byte string, which would like completely saturate your your terminal. So that was also fixed via PR that has not been merged yet. And also the file, like if it returned like a binary, you would have needed to like process that yourself. I've made it so that the CLI already processes that for you, and so you get this nice just link. You click on this. That is a very, yeah, that is a raspberry lemonade. Is that what it was? Yeah. Okay, and now we're gonna tell it, and this is a, sorry, did you say something? Okay, so carrying on, um, so this is an interesting thing. So the task is complete, right? We're not recursing over anything. It's not requesting any actions. But if we tell it like create the same image you just created, but add rocks around it, um, and inside it. There's not a lot of around in this image and inside it. So you'll notice that this agent is actually like it's actually able to like reference the previous image, which was from another task. So now it's adding rocks around the original image, which is I actually spent like an hour or two trying to figure out how it did this. I never actually got to the bottom of it. And I think this has something to do with um, artifacts. So, oh, and that's a shame. I actually haven't yet covered artifacts and parts, and that's like something that I'm actually quite unsure about. So, if we go to like the types somewhere here, no types. Yes, this. So we'll see artifacts. Oh yeah, in messages. So whenever it returns a message, we have um, a role. It has parts, and a part has can be a text file or data part. Where's artifacts actually configured? Like artifacts, artifact. Task. Okay, so task just contains like a running list of the artifacts that have been created. This is not necessarily the same as like a message part, even though it has like the same structure. So uh, if you look at the if you look at the sorry, I'm getting lost here. Artifacts, set artifacts. Okay, an artifact is very similar to a message, as I think what I was getting at here. Uh, so a task contains artifacts and a history of messages, which contains multiple parts. This gets tricky. So both artifact and messages both contain parts, and a part can be like texts and images. Um, as indicated here, it can be text, a file, or data part. So um, I'm not entirely sure what the difference between artifact and messages is, but as far as I've been able to gather, is an artifact just contains all of the different stuff that has been created in any order, and history is like an ordered history of the different messages that have been sent. And also like the parameters are somewhat distinct. So we're just gonna copy this over and just put it side by side with actually we just open this to the side here. Artifact, mess, me, okay, messages. Okay, and then we have messages. Okay, message is a lot simpler than an artifact. I guess the intended use, and this is just me judging off of like my brief experience and what I'm seeing here is that a message is like very clearly just the information that is being returned, the information being returned in an exchange between the client and the agent. Whereas an artifact is intended to be like more is intent like a sorry, let me reset. So the way I think you use messages is you basically just have the list of messages. Um, you're basically going to display the messages like whenever you have a chatbot you person A message, person B message, person A message, and so on and so forth. That's what messages is for. That running exchange of messages, but artifacts just like contains all of the messages that have been sent back to you in a way that is more parsable by description and metadata index.
Have you introspected the data here? Is that one to one? Because I like in some ways, just from the names of it, not having dug into this, I would expect this to be like Anthropic at least has sort of built this concept of, oh, I have a durable artifact that I am having a conversation about, which is editing it, which is a really nice user interface in a lot of ways, right? It's like I'm using this chat conversation to update an artifact that is
Ah,
like a durable thing. I don't know if Gemini has a similar thing, but they might. And so like that's a nice abstraction, and it does it. One of them is ordered. I think artifacts might be ordered as well. They're sort of this is a more durable thing that multiple messages might be related to.
yeah, I think you're on it. I think that's probably it. It makes sense. It makes sense why they're structuring it that way. Okay,
I
yeah.
guess the question I had related to this, looking at it, is like in your logs, it was showing like starting a new task, and
Uh,
the when you looked at the data model, the artifacts were like scoped by task, right? Like a task had a list of artifacts and it had a list of messages. So
yeah,
I guess that's what I'm where I'm kind of wondering is like what is the like what's the memory model here essentially, like, right, are these actually scoped by task? Like you referenced a previous task. So is there a durable memory? Is that on the agent side, or is that getting sent over via like your interactions?
that
Like I
that is
that
that is 100% on the server side, specifically
okay.
like how it's like managing the state. I'm not entirely sure. I actually like I spent like an hour or 2 hours trying to figure out like how it was able to reference the previous image and why it decided to reference the previous image, even though they were distinct tasks. But maybe yeah, let's try actually printing the task like the whole task. Oh, yeah, I think I have done this experiment before, but we'll do it again. Um,
Oh, I wonder if there's like a set of tasks related to, because I see there's a session ID in here as well. So could there be like um, a set of like is something keeping a list of tasks somewhere or something like that?
Hang on, let me find the where artifact. Wait, is this? Oh yeah, interesting. So task artifact update event. So this is I think supporting your theory. So okay, I think what is being printed here? Task result. I think this is printing the entire task. So but just to sanity check.
Yeah, so that's interesting because it did in its history, it doesn't have any of the previous stuff.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, like, since there's this session ID, like, is the session ID durable, and can it use that to look up what are the previous tasks?
Yeah, so I think that's up to the agent to decide. The agent has passed in the session ID, it's passed in the task ID, it is up to the agent what it does with that. And I guess in
Okay,
this case, the agent has the ability to like reference the old image.
got it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's
We are
everything.
just about at time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome. Does anyone have questions for Sebastian while he's up here? And thank you again for taking through this. It's good to get somebody to dive into it.
yeah, no problem. It's interesting.
All
Yeah, no
right, I'm
problem.
just seeing thank yous, no major questions. So let's wrap. We do now have in the AI in Action Club channel a Discord bot for scheduling future talks. So uh, we don't have a speaker next week. If you have a topic you'd like to do, or you want to go deeper on A2A, or try your own thing, or do something like that, or a PR, if you want to come in and do a side by side of A2A and MCP and sort of show some of these things or dive into that, like I think that would be a good topic. Also, as always, anything that is about actually using these tools coming out in the wild. But thank you all. Happy Friday. And particularly Sebastian, thank you for taking the lead here.
Yeah, no problem. It was interesting to look into.
All right. Cheers, y'all.
All right, thanks. Bye.